What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Early Read BetSides College Football Betting Show. Week 10, double digits here. College football, we have maybe the biggest week of the year. I know I've said that a few times this season, but this one feels like we got something special brewing. We have potential game of the year, Georgia versus Tennessee. We have the college football playoff rankings coming out tonight on ESPN. We have a bunch of conference games in play that are going to help shake out some big conference debates. So I had to pull out all the stops here, especially with Georgia kind of being our first marquee matchup with them this year. So I called in Graham Coffey at Dog Out West. He's the co-creator of Dog Central, Georgia blog. Also one of the sharpest guys in college football right now. I believe I saw on his Twitter bio 110, 70, and 2 against the spread this year. That's high volume and a high ROI. Graham, thanks a ton for joining the show. I apologize if I butchered the record. I think that's what I saw.
No, you're good. Yeah, that was 2021 record, but we're 2022 is moving along well. 10-5 last week against the spread. So nice. Happy to be here. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we are obviously sitting on a massive game, Georgia, Tennessee. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. I want to talk two topics, though, because we are in the double digits now. It's week 10, and I've been saying this from the beginning of the season. You filter out your priors when you're betting college football. There's more data points with each passing week, and the market's tighter. Me and you both bet on Sundays. We're trying to get some early numbers. We have our numbers created. We know what we're looking for. This Sunday, I sat there and was like, I'm in a little bit of not a pickle. I still got some bets down, but I wasn't as confident. There wasn't as much movement in the market at certain spots compared to, week 4, week 5. Anything you wanted to comment on just some, sharper sides and totals heading into the home stretch of the season?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I think it's great that you do the show on Tuesday early in the week because if you look at some of these games, Georgia, Florida was a great example. That line got up around 22.5, up around 24.5 in some places by the time that game kicked off on Saturday afternoon. And it opened, at 21, 21.5. So that was a 22-point game, depending on, if you wanted to bet Georgia in that game, depending on when you did it, you won or lost, and, you were sweating out those final minutes. So there was a lot of games like that last week, right? Like the Michigan State game finishes right on the number. West Virginia, TCU, that over-under moved around a little bit, and then Max Duggan throws a touchdown pass with 11
seconds. It was important to
left.
some people on the show. It was important to me that I had the team total over. That was important there. We needed that.
So I was just on the straight total over, and so I was thrilled when it happened, but it was a good win, right? But it's just right now it's definitely getting sharper and sharper, and I think if you like a line, you got to hit it early, right? So that's really where we are at this point in the season. There's no wait until Saturday morning is sometimes it's too late.
Yeah, no, completely agree. That's why like you said, this is why we do this show. It's important to get numbers early, especially, not that, we're the sharpest people in the world, but we have an idea, we're covering the sport. We know kind of have the beat on where this line's going to move, some certain injury reports and stuff. And, there's an advantage to betting early in the week and getting some closing line value. Like you said, Michigan State, Georgia, Florida, those games kind of were determined by when you bet it. So, there is some advantages to betting early in the week. So let's talk about this week, though. Before the games actually start, we have the college football playoff reveal. The first rankings come out tonight on ESPN. I think, for my matter, whether you put Oregon in the mix, I think Oregon is the 8th team. But to me, there are 7 actual contenders right now to make the college football playoff, all for different reasons. You have your 3 SEC teams, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, 2 Big Ten teams, Ohio State, Michigan. You have Clemson, and you have TCU, 2 undefeated Power 5 teams. So going into this first reveal, Graham, do you have any sort of opinion? I know a lot of people get up in arms over the rankings. I think of it more as it is a WWE style event. Like they are leaning into that. This is going to look very different. It is November 1st tonight. I don't even know when the final rankings are revealed, in sometime in December. So this doesn't really matter to anyone. So I want to preface that. It doesn't actually matter, but I am curious, do you have like a projected top 7 that, we can maybe get upset about, just me and you back and forth real quick?
Well, so
or any, I guess, storylines that you think are important to reveal them.
The big question for me is where this committee is going to rank TCU.
Interesting.
Just because they're not the name brand, but they are a Power 5 conference team, and they have played some good opponents on the road. It's just, if they're not in the top 4 tonight, I think there's no hope of them ever being in the top 4, basically, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think they might barring everyone finishing with a loss and just like a lot of chaos and them, being able to continue run the table, win a Big 12 championship game against somebody that's a decent opponent. And that's just because I'm very curious to see how they get treated. And like, same with Clemson. Clemson, I think we have some precedent of the strength of schedule. I mean, the ACC is horrible this year. Let's just say it. It's okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
But yeah, like if Clemson's number 6, I don't think anyone should be up in arms. Because Clemson runs the table and wins the ACC title, they're gonna go. Like they're not gonna leave an undefeated 13-0 Clemson out. But I'm very curious to see who's number 1. I think Tennessee could be just because they beat Alabama. And we're gonna talk about Tennessee, Georgia in a second. But like
Tennessee's win over Alabama is the most impressive data point probably to this point. You could say Georgia, Oregon, but I feel like that happening in week 1 kind of weighs it down a little bit. Whereas I think Tennessee beating Alabama, that's probably like the most impressive thing you could have on your resume right now.
Yeah,
again, it doesn't really mean anything going forward. But
no, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, that's definitely the game of the year in college football. It's the game that everyone remembers. It is the it's the media talking / focal point of the season thus far. What I would say is that I do think like that game. Tennessee still gave up 50 points in that game.
Yeah.
They scored 52, but they gave up 49, right? And it's like I don't know. How. I feel like every year the committee's a little different, and they look at a lot of stats, and I think some years they throw some things out and they look at others, and it's like, what's going to be kind of the buzzword this year? Is it going to be like game control? Is it going to be, whatever it is? I'm curious to see what that will be, but I think Tennessee will be number 1. I think Georgia probably gets the nod over Ohio State at number 2 because of that Oregon win you're talking about. I think Buckeyes would be 3. And then, I'm very curious to see kind of how everyone falls in line after that. I personally would put TCU number 4 because of their resume, but I don't know if this committee will do that or not.
Yeah. So I have my top 7 right here. This is the flawless 100% correct. I got the envelope early. But the way I see it is I think that this committee, they want to set up a 1 versus 2 matchup this weekend in Athens. So they're going to give Tennessee the nod because I believe it's 4 top 25 wins. The offense is high powered. If Georgia's won, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They're defending national champions. They still are going about their business, still arguably the best team in the country. So to me, I go Tennessee, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson at 4, I think gets the nod because if Clemson goes undefeated, I don't see them getting knocked off. I think that they set that precedent now. I think Michigan 5, Bama 6, because you gotta again try and create the narrative about it all. But Bama 6, so they have to run up the table when the SEC get in there. And then I think they put TCU 7. I think that the Big 12 is going to get knocked down this year for being so competitive. And to me, a good conference, but no team really being outstanding. So I think TCU ends up getting shafted on tonight's reveal, in my opinion. I know you're kind of hoping that they do. I have TCU futures. I already cashed their win total over. I've been backing them. But I just think that the come-from-behind efforts are going to be dinged against them as opposed to a Michigan who's kind of blowing out everyone in their way.
Yeah, but, I mean, Michigan has played a really bad schedule. They had the impressive win over Penn State at home, right? And that was good. And, I think they matched up a lot better with Penn State than Ohio State did because Michigan's such a kind of run-first team.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think the resume for Michigan, to me, like if you look at where they kind of rank statistically, nationally, yards per play, all that stuff, a lot of things that I look at when I'm betting games, you have to do so much manual adjustment because they played 3 of the bottom 10 teams in the FBS. Like they played UConn and Hawaii. And, it's just like you kind of have to take all that out and then figure out what they are. I think they're a really good football team, but I like that game last week against Michigan State. They really struggled to finish drives in the red zone. Like, if they come up against somebody that has a offense that can actually score, I'm very curious to see kind of how that plays out. And if someone can make JJ McCarthy go win a game, we haven't seen him do it yet.
Yeah.
So.
No, 100%. I think so. It sounds like, before we move on, you think Alabama still gets kind of a friendly ranking here, or you're still kind of concerned about where Bama's resume is today? Tonight.
I've got a lot of really strong takes on Alabama and where they are this year, because I think this is the worst defense they've had since 2007, and there's a lot that's not going well there. If Bryce Young's not on this team, I think they're a 3 or 4 loss team. And
I agree.
Just that
I agree completely.
Papers over so much,
yeah.
But I would still put Michigan over them.
Cool.
But I think what we'll probably see the committee do is Bama always gets kind of grandfathered into these things, right?
Yep.
Like they always kind of, it's just that they always get the benefit of the doubt, right? And it's like, they've kind of operated under a different set of rules in the playoff era than a lot of teams have, just because it's like, oh, they just won 2 out of 3 national championships, so we're not going to leave them out. So maybe this committee treats them differently, but I doubt they will.
Yeah. And again, just to recap, where Alabama's ranked tonight, if they run the table and they win the SEC championship game, they are getting into the playoffs. So it's all moot, right. But it's fun. It's fun, content and things to talk about. But it should be interesting to see where certain teams set up, because it also opens up paths on how teams could jump into one another, where they fall to and stuff like that. But yeah, let's get to some picks though. Let's give out some winners here. Before we get to that, a little bit of housekeeping. I gave up more losers than winners last week. I went 4-5 last week on the early read. 39, 32-1 against the spread on the year, though. So we're still way good on that. We're beating the market left and right. So that's good. You like this kind of content? Make sure you subscribe to the BetSide YouTube page right below you. If you're listening in podcast form, 5 stars, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And yeah, let's give out some picks. I will have plenty more on my bet stamp at RW33, but we will start where all good things start. Athens, Georgia, for the game of the year. The Georgia Bulldogs, defending national champions, welcome in Tennessee, laying 8.5, total around, we'll call it 66 for this show. And the storylines are immense here. We have Georgia. Are they going to be able to hold up their end of the bargain as the defending national champions, but maybe a little bit more different than last year's team? And I'm excited to get Graham's opinion on the team going into this one. And Tennessee's kind of been the lightning rod of college football this season. Hendon Hooker operating at such a high level in Josh Heupel's offense. 3 future NFL receivers on the outside, just playing at a frenetic pace. They beat Alabama at home as underdogs. Can they now go on the road and hold up their end of the bargain and really announce themselves as national championship contenders? I still think that, for me, I need to see it one more time before I'm calling this team, LSU 2019 or anything like that. We see people in the comments are getting pumped up. We're seeing some split opinions. So Graham, I'll start with you. Why don't you just catch the people up with Georgia? Because I feel like with college football, the great teams, you're almost out of sight because you're so much far superior to all your opponents. Like we had Ohio State, we do this marquee matchup every week. Ohio State was the marquee matchup for the first time last week. This is Georgia's first time as the marquee matchup. So it's almost a little, you don't really hear about them as much. So why don't you catch it up on Georgia? And I know you had a great thread on them versus Florida last week. Maybe kind of use that as a reference point.
Yeah, absolutely. Georgia's kind of been on cruise control since that Oregon game up until last week against Florida. And they came out and they opened up the offense a little bit. Like Stetson Bennett's average depth of target against Florida last week was up around 14 yards. It had been 7, 8, 8.5 almost every game this season, right? Like they're throwing downfield a little more. The tight ends, Bowers and Washington, who are huge weapons, they get 14 combined targets in that game against Florida after seeing, a few balls each every game this season. So you kind of saw like the playbook open for Georgia on Saturday against Florida in a way that it hadn't. You also saw it open on the defensive side of the ball. Like there's been a lot of angst and discussion amongst Georgia folks and people on our website of like, can this defense get pressure? because they don't see the sack numbers that you saw from 2021 Georgia. The reality is that, like, up until this Florida game last week, teams have been getting the ball out in an average of just a little over 2 seconds from snap to throw on passing plays. And that's including, when they flush a guy and he throws it into the third row, right? So, like, teams have run a lot of quick game on Georgia to try and neutralize their defensive line. And because of that, I think a lot of people are like, well, maybe this defensive line isn't as good as last year's, and it's not, but it's still very, very good. And
let's not to cut you off, Graham, but that was like the best defense of all time we're talking about.
Right, exactly.
It's okay. It is okay to be like just amazing and not like transcendent defense. It's okay. They can still be really good.
Right. 100%. And like, Jalen Carter is still on this team, and he was the best player on that defense last year. He was better than any of them. He will be probably drafted higher than anyone off that team last year was. And he's been out for a month, right? And so all of a sudden he's back last week against Florida, coming off an MCL sprain. He's in on third downs and a couple second and long situations, but like, he's blowing up double teams in the hole, and he's all over Anthony Richardson, and he's got, I think 4 pressures on like 13 pass rush snaps. Like, the kid is a monster. So what I'm trying to drive at is, like, there's been a lot of discussion of like, oh, well, Georgia, let Kent State hang around a little bit and score 22 in Athens. And it's like, well, like, they were rotating their third team defensive lines into the game, in 3rd and 5 situations in the red zone. Like, I don't think they'll do that against Tennessee. Right. So they have played the most vanilla style of football you could possibly imagine over the last 6 weeks. And you kind of saw a glimpse of things on Saturday of like, especially on defense, you saw them actually, rush more than 4 for the first time in like a month. And I mean, they created a lot of havoc. They had 29 pressures against Anthony Richardson in that game. So it's very interesting kind of where they are, because I think you're finally kind of seeing things open up, and I wouldn't draw too much if I was betting this game, which I am, into sort of, oh, well, they had a couple missed run fits against Missouri and that game got close or whatever, like they've had a turnover problem at times on offense, and that's concerning for this game, right? They had 3 last week. They had 2 on the road at Missouri. They had 3 against Kent State that were like, fumbled punts. And it's not real. I mean, Stetson Bennett only has 5 interceptions on the year. There's been like weird wide receiver fumbles and muff punt kind of things. And it's just, none of that stuff really seems to happen when they're like in a close game. But
it's like, it's almost like they're a little like bored, like playing with their food a little bit more than you do.
Yes, 100%, man. I mean, they're up 28-3 at halftime last week. And it's like, I had been told kind of privately for a couple weeks, like, this team is really, really, kind of pissed off going into that Tennessee game. Like, they heard all the comments of like Tennessee Alabama rematch after the first time. Yeah. And so I think I was a little concerned they might come out a little disinterested in the first half against Florida. I think they came out interested, took care of business, and then sort of went to sleep. But them getting challenged, Florida made that a 7-point or an 8-point game in the third quarter. And then Georgia, 6-play, 78 drive, 5 of them on the ground, right down, touchdown, 3 and out, touchdown. Like, so there was kind of that, like, seeing them answer adversity one more time before this game, I think actually is a little bit of a good sign, just to kind of put them in a spot where things are going poorly, and then they're able to flip that, and a drive is something you want to see before a big game like this.
Yeah, 100%. I saw Georgia go up early. I turned the game off. I got like my 3 TVs. I moved on to the next game, and then I checked my phone. I see, Florida made this an 8-point game or whatever it was. Maybe I'll throw it on for a second. I watched the next drive, Georgia, like you said, 5 runs right down the field. And I'm like, all right, I got my fix. I understand what Georgia is. My one kind of stress point for this Georgia game, and before we give out our bet, maybe we could talk about just 2 quick points, but Tennessee's secondary is the weak point of this defense. And I bet on Tennessee against Alabama because I wasn't sure how Bryce Young's shoulder was going to hold up off the AC joint sprain. Could he really challenge this team vertically? And that's why I thought Tennessee could actually hum on offense and keep it within one score. The game didn't go how I thought it would, but Tennessee still got the job done because I think Alabama dug themselves too big of a hole and they couldn't win with margin or even win the game outright. So now my question is, Tennessee, 98th in defensive pass success rate. Georgia's offense, though, like you said, hasn't really stretched the field that much this year. Do you think that is a sign of they're not capable, or they're kind of keeping the playbook a little bit close because it's not necessary to do that to be able to win so easily like they have? Do you think that Georgia on Saturday is going to, stretch the field a little bit more vertically, maybe get those tight ends running deeper down the field and challenge that suspect Tennessee secondary? Because Tennessee's defensive line is legit. It's the secondary that I think is where this team loses games.
Yeah, they will. I just don't know how much they'll actually want to. I think Georgia's going to want to. They've been extremely efficient on offense. They haven't been like overly explosive, but I mean, going into last week, first in the country in offensive success rate, first in the country in rushing success rate, second in the country in passing down success rate, first in the country in standard down success rate, like longest average drive for scoring touchdowns over Ohio State and all the so this is not an offense that, and I think that's probably where a lot of people are like, Georgia's got a good defense and they're not the offensive juggernaut. And people see this game as Tennessee offense versus Georgia defense. Georgia's offense is really, really good. And this offensive line has come together over the last few weeks. Like, it's the best one they've had in Athens, I think, since 2017 when they ran the ball 70% of the time with Nick Chubb and Shoney Michel. Yeah, I mean, this offensive line gave up 4 pressures to Florida last week. Like, they're very good. And I think that's kind of what Georgia's going to want to do in this game, is just lean on Tennessee. I think they will throw the ball downfield, but I don't think Georgia necessarily wants to. They don't want to do what Alabama did, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think Georgia wants to go into this game and have 5, 6, 7 minute scoring drives, or at least, 4 and 5 minute scoring drives.
Yeah.
I at some point, like, you see this team go tempo. They went tempo against Florida some in the first half, and it was like right down the field. So if they need to go score quick, they can. But it's not really what they've been trying to do. And in some ways, as a prognosticator, that makes them more reliable, right? Like, big plays can be a little bit of an anomaly. I mean, Tennessee, in some ways, they kind of rely on busted coverages. And it's like, well, what happens if you don't have 2 of those busted coverages a half, right?
Yeah.
And so I think for Georgia, like, it's a little more predictable as to what they're going to be.
Yeah. So make the bet. Who's gonna cover? We'll see who's gonna cover. Then who's gonna win. A little bit different. But let's hear it.
Georgia's going to cover this game. They are.
I agree.
People don't want to hear it, but like 8.5. Like, Vegas is begging you to bet Tennessee at +9. I think Georgia's defense, the personnel is different, but Georgia and Missouri played a 42-29 game in 2018 when Josh Heupel was the offensive coordinator there, and Kirby Smart doesn't like to give up 30 points to anybody, and he spent a bunch of time figuring out this offense and studying it and working on it. Like, they know what this system is, and I'm going to say something that's going to make a lot of people angry, but if you get Hendon Hooker off of his first read, he's not very accurate. If you get him moving off his spot, he's not very accurate. Georgia, I'm not saying they're not going to give up plays. Tennessee's going to score points in this game, but Georgia can pressure up the middle like Alabama cannot. Alabama's coming around the edge, and they didn't do that in that game because they were worried about the run. But like, Georgia's not going to let Tennessee just hand it off for 5-6 yards a pop in the shotgun over and over up the middle. That's not going to happen in this game. So Georgia pressuring the A gaps, I think, will be a little too much for Hooker to figure out. They'll do enough to confuse them. And on offense, we haven't really seen Georgia play 60 minutes of offense in a game this year. But if they want to, I think Georgia can put up 50 in this game, or 45, 50.
I'm with you here. I'm on Georgia. I bet them -8.5. I completely agree. I think you look at this game a few weeks ago, Tennessee closed. First of all, the market disagreed. The market was 7.5. Then Bryce Young gets rolled in. It closes 9. They were 9-point home underdogs to Alabama. You're not telling me they're going on the road to face Georgia and they're going to be less than that? I can't get to this number. I make it closer to 10. I think Tennessee's a great story, but I think Georgia, like you said, they're almost like a sleeping giant. They have not been tested, on this show before the season. I said, I still don't love Alabama. Like I like Georgia and Ohio State a lot more than Alabama. Georgia, I still think is this complete roster that hasn't been challenged because they're that much better than everyone. Now, I think we're going to see them flex their muscle a little bit and remind everyone that, hey, we're the national champions. And that sounds narrative-y, but the numbers back it up, like you just said. And we saw them, they come out and blow out Florida. Florida's much worse than Tennessee, but Florida makes a little bit of a run, wakes up Georgia a little bit, and then they just go right back and still end up almost covering a 3-touchdown spread. So I think Georgia's the better team. I think they show it. I think that this spread is an overreaction to what we're seeing with Tennessee, who, again, they're a great story, but we're putting them in like some rare air here, getting nearly, an upgrade, near touchdown upgrade than they did 3 weeks ago against Alabama. I think it's just a little much. So glad that we're on the same page there on Georgia, Tennessee. There's the recap graphic. Me and Graham both taking the -8.5 with the Bulldogs as we move into a bunch of bets here. We're going to go rapid fire for you. So Graham, you're an SEC guy. You have a pulse on the conference. Let's hear another SEC bet you got for us on Saturday.
I like Florida +4 on the road at A&M. I would bet them anywhere. I'd bet them down to +3, and that's a game I may sprinkle a little money line action on as well. I really like where that team is psychologically. Billy Napier has done a good job of keeping that team fighting. That team did not come out and quit in the second half against Georgia, and I think that surprised Georgia a little bit, but getting to see that, kind of firsthand, up close and personal, just made me feel like that's an underdog I want to bet because they'll come smashing through that back door, So I think the biggest thing is Florida first in the country in rushing explosiveness. Led the SEC in yards per carry before facing that Georgia defense. Texas A&M just gave up 390 on the ground to Ole Miss. I think Florida can control this game. Anthony Richardson uses legs, and he's improved as a passer. He's not there yet, but he can hit some. He has a nice deep ball. He'll hit the explosive play occasionally, and I don't think this Florida defense is great, but I don't think this Texas A&M offense is either. So give me the Gators.
Yeah, I wonder where Texas A&M's head's at. 3 offensive linemen ruled out for the year last year. They suspended 3 other guys. They're kind of a mess. The only pushback I have is if Wegman, maybe they found something with the freshman now, the 5-star. Maybe they could get something going, but it's not a team I'm interested in laying more than a field goal with in A&M. I think it's, this is more of a coin flip. College football, more inclined to take the underdog. So, at over a field goal, I don't hate the Florida look. My SEC bet, it's a gross one, but under 42.5 in Kentucky, Missouri. I think this ticked down in some places to 41. Anything above 41 is a play on the under for me. Missouri's defense has quietly been one of the best in the SEC. Number 1 in the country in defensive line yards, top 15 success rate. They held down the Georgia offense better than pretty much any other team in the country. Their offense is still terrible, though. So the defense keeps them in games. Now they're going against a Kentucky team that we thought maybe they could get it going off the bye against Tennessee. They looked like a mess. Will Levis doesn't look healthy. I don't think he's very good to begin with. The offensive line is a disaster. And these are also 2 of the 5 slowest teams in the entire country on a plays per minute basis. So this is going to be old school, slow, burn the play clock. I don't think there's going to be many points here. Both defenses are better than both offenses. So I'll take the under 42.5. Anything above 41 is good with me. There's a pair of SEC bets for you as we get the recap graphic up. Graham is on Florida +4 against Texas A&M, and then I'm on under 42 and Missouri, Kentucky in 2 of, there's a few really big SEC games, and we go for the 2 more meaningless games on the card. But that's what it's all about. Listen, you got to get an edge somewhere.
It's where the value is, man. I'm sorry.
Let's talk some MACtion, though, tonight, because it's the college football playoff reveal. I kind of buried the lead. It's MACtion tonight. Happy MACtion to everyone who celebrates in this fine world. Graham, I know we're looking at the same game, though, so I'm interested to hear your take. Buffalo opened about a pick'em +1 at Ohio. These are 2 teams in the MAC East that are contending for a championship bid here. Buffalo's out to a 3-point favorite, though. You like the Bulls, though. Why?
I do, and I will, full transparency for the viewers, I bet this when it was at 1, so
Yeah.
like,
Listen, we love transparency here. We're all about it.
I still like him at -3. I would, if it gets to 3 in the hook, then I would be a little more cautious. But I really like, Buffalo is a ground-based attack. They're a running team. Ohio just came off giving up 267 yards on the ground in Northern Illinois. So I think that Buffalo is going to be able to do what they do and run the ball. I think that Ohio Northern Illinois game, from a yardage standpoint, Northern Illinois should have scored more than they did in that game. So I like Buffalo. I just kind of like where they are. It feels like a team with a kind of a newer staff that is still growing and peaking. Not to say Ohio isn't, but I like them in the spot because of the ground game versus that rushing defense, and pretty sizable SP plus advantage there as well. Buffalo 92 overall versus 113 in Ohio. So that's, a little more than a field goal spread and kind of how I try to calculate those things, but it's MACtion, man. Chaos reigns. So, you might get me here.
Yeah. So I took the Bobcats here. So I took the Buffalo over wins before the season. I liked all the transfers coming in. They actually started terrible. Now they're on this heater, but I think that the heater is somewhat smoke and mirrors. We played 2 backup quarterbacks during this 4-game MAC winning streak. They're +8 in turnovers over their last 3 games. And now they're going against Curtis Rourke, who's playing really, really well for Ohio. 16-3 touchdown to interception ratio. This is a top 25 passing success unit. So I'm a little nervous that Buffalo, they're banking on turnovers and they're banking on chaos, but Rourke has been one of the better MAC quarterbacks. Look at Buffalo's defense, 110th in yards per play allowed, but 30th in points per drive. So that means teams are moving the ball on them, but then kind of fumbling it, turning it over, vomiting, missing field goals, like that. So I'll take Ohio +3. I just think that, like you said, it's MACtion. Give me the home team, I guess. This is a lot of points to lay with a Buffalo team that I think might be running a little good. And listen, doesn't mean it's going to stop this week. So I took Ohio +3. I know, Graham, you basically have the money line +1. So if Ohio loses by 1 or 2, we both win. It's all good. So we'll see how that goes.
Straddle this bad boy.
Yeah, let's both hit here. For the sake of the early read. But let's bring up that recap graphic. So Graham is gonna, for the sake of the show, take Buffalo -3. But again, he took +1 earlier than the early read, and then I took Ohio +3 and some Tuesday night MACtion for the real sickos.
Just enjoy it,
Yeah, just let the chaos come. Just let it come and hit you.
Yeah, and I don't hate the over in this game either. I think
I agree.
If I was betting the total, I would definitely be betting over instead of under.
Definitely agree. Let's talk some underdogs, though. We just said MACtion might be live for the underdog. You're back in the SEC, though. Let me hear your underdog play for this week.
Yeah, Auburn going on the road to Mississippi State. Just fired Brian Harsin.
Yeah, finally.
Catalin Williams is the interim head coach. You're talking about a guy who played there. Even throughout all of the chaos with Harsin, this team hasn't really quit. They're not a good football team. Okay, it's all right, but they are what they are good at defensively, or I shouldn't say good at, but they're a very poor run defense. Mike Leach has ran the ball more this year than most years in the past, but he still can't help himself. Like he still will, get midway through the second quarter and be like, God, I got to have 50 pass attempts in this game, or I'm just going to spontaneously combust on this sideline, and we'll stop doing what's working. So I like Auburn to play hard in this game, play scrappy, keep it close. I think their pass defense is actually pretty okay. Their defensive front is decent at rushing the passer. I don't know if they have like 5 dudes hit the portal over the rest of this week, then maybe, slow down or see where those contribute.
This hit 14 and bounced back down to 12.5. So it seems like people were buyers to keep this inside 2 scores.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I wouldn't like it at 10.5, but I will like it anywhere to 11.
Yeah, for sure. Don't hate that play there. I'm going back to an old friend of mine, Kansas State plus 2.5. This fine program told you last week that Kansas State undervalued against Oklahoma State. They were going to run all over them. They beat them 48-0. The game was over in the first quarter. It was maybe the easiest bet I've hit all season.
Nice.
We're going back to the well, though, with Kansas State. Texas, I still don't know where to rate this Texas team. I said against Oklahoma State, didn't really get why they were laying 6.5 on the road. Quinn Ewers was terrible in that game. 19 of 49, 3 interceptions. I know there was some penalty discrepancies there, but again, this is a Kansas State team that is going to run the ball. They're not going to limit turnovers. Texas might have a strong defensive line, but they give up chunk plays. Bottom half of the country, an explosive run rate. Kansas State has Deuce Vaughn. Adrian Martinez might be back. Will Howard, he looked great anyway, so I don't think there's like some massive drop-off there. Chris Kleiman's awesome. 27-14-1 against the spread. 15-7 at home. 7-3 as a home dog. I mean, this guy is an ATM, and I'm going to keep riding him. So give me Kansas State plus 2.5. I just think that Texas might just not be that good. They're talented, but I know they're off a bye. Sarkisian, I don't know if he's a rally the troops type person for a team that's drawing dead in the Big 12 already. Injuries kind of hurt them, but this is just a good Kansas State team at night in the Little Apple. I think they get the cover, and they probably win this game outright if you want to sprinkle on the money line. I know it's a small dog, but yeah, Kansas State plus 2.5 is my play for some Big 12 action. So there are underdog plays. Auburn plus 12.5, plus 12 for Graham, and I am taking plus 2.5 with Kansas State against Texas. Now some best of the rest. Just a few more bets here. Graham, is there any other bets, any other work you want to plug ahead of the big game with Georgia, Tennessee? Anything of the like, feel free. This is open season here.
Sure. I mean, just rapid fire, some games that caught my eye. Love UNC minus 11 against Virginia. Virginia can't score points. North Carolina can. They fixed that defense. James Madison plus 10 at Louisville. I like that spot for the Dukes. Louisville is prone to a letdown game.
Yep.
Ohio State minus 36 at Northwestern. I would bet this up to like 42, honestly. Northwestern can't score points. Yeah. And then as far as my work, you can find me on Twitter at Dog Out West. Check us out on dogcentral.com if you're a Georgia fan, or if you like kind of deep dive advanced statistics. We've got some betting type content that I think everyone can enjoy. We do a relative net yard per play metric that we kind of, have tweaked with and played with, and is a fun thing to compare teams. So come check us out over there. And if you are a Georgia fan, we have, all sorts of great UGA intel and analysis, and we'd love to see you. For sure. No, that was awesome stuff. I crushed it. I got 4 quick plays I want to run through. 2 weekday plays. So we'll add this, as like a MACtion bonus. Another game tonight. I bet this morning just because the line, I think, has gotten a little nuts here. But Ball State plus 7 against Kent State tonight. We don't know if Kent State's going to get back. Yeah, it opened 4.5 where I made it, and I was like, okay, stay away, whatever, that's fine. Now it's out to 7. I'm going to play back and take Ball State. Colin Schley might be back for Kent State, but it just doesn't matter because the Kent State defense is so terrible. They allowed 27 to Akron last week. Ball State has a stud running back, Carson Steele, 13th leading rusher in the country. Kent's defense, I know they played a really wild non-conference schedule, including against Georgia, but they're still 114th in EPA per play, so it hasn't really improved all that much. I think Ball State could keep this inside 1 score. We were just talking MACtion, underdogs, chaos. Why not Ball State plus 7? I think they could keep it within 1 score. Thursday night, I believe it's Thursday night, App State minus 3 against Coastal. Don't love Coastal at all this year. Grayson McCall is awesome. Everybody else is gone. So it's just Grayson McCall. This App State team, the offense has been much better this year. Chase Bryce has been better. They're top 12 in total EPA, and they played a really tough schedule, much tougher than Coastal. Coastal bottom 10 in strength of schedule this year, and they're bottom 10 in defensive success rate. So I think App State is going to dictate the terms of this game. I like them laying a field goal. I make this game closer to like minus 4.5, 5. 2 more. Gross one, Iowa, plus 4.5 against Purdue. Maybe Jeff Brom just figured out this Iowa team.
I remember last year they upset them as double-digit underdogs, but Purdue's a one-dimensional offense. They only pass the ball, and Iowa has one of the best secondaries in the country. I know their offense is one of the worst. Their defense is one of the best. The Purdue defense also not that great. They allowed 26 or more to every FBS team outside of Minnesota in a game where they got a lot of timely red zone turnovers. So I don't really rate this Purdue defense that highly. So I think Iowa could keep it close, +4.5. And last one, Boise -7.5 against BYU. This is a BYU team I loved early in the year. I thought that they had high upside. They've just crashed and burned. Haven't covered a game since mid-September. 2-7 against the number all year. They're also playing their 10th straight game, and they're banged up. They're not going to a Boise team that is firing on all cylinders since making the change from Hank Bachmeier at quarterback to Taylon Green, and they brought back Dirk Cutter to be their OC. Offense is averaging 35 or more, or they've scored 35 or more in 3 of 4 games since making those changes. The offense is humming. BYU's defense stinks. I think Boise runs away with this one. They look like the best team in the Mountain West now. So Boise -7.5. I'm not afraid of the hook. I think they win this one by closer to 14 points. I make this game double digits. So there's some best rest. Any comments there, Graham? And then we could answer a few questions from the comments.
No, I love your logic actually on all of that. I love the Boise pick as well. Boise, I feel like a lot of people kind of gave up on them. I think they fired their offensive coordinator midseason and kind of had some changes. And, I'm sorry, it was the quarterback that left, Bachmeier dipped out and all of that. And you kind of counted them out. And I don't know, maybe he was the problem or there was a locker room issue or what, but they've been great over the last, few weeks. Yeah. So, definitely, I think some kind of hidden value in betting Boise a little bit because some of those early storylines and results are still kind of influencing the market, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think 7.5. It's starting to catch up, but it's not all the way there because the defense has been nails all year. It's just the offense is really starting to hit it into another gear. So that's why I think they could win with some margin against just a BYU team that can't handle that schedule. It's just they tried, and I liked them going into the year because of that chance they took. It's just blown up in their face. They're gassed. I mean, they lost to Liberty by 2 scores, lost to ECU. So, a few questions in the comments. I mean, we hit on a bunch of these. Now I'm looking at them, but first one, West Virginia, Iowa State coming in from Jerry. West Va +8. They just ruled out their running back, I think, for the year I saw right before the show. Donaldson. Yeah. Their
I wouldn't touch it.
I don't know if I trust Iowa State to win with margin like this, but West Va's secondary is so bad, and Iowa State passed the ball a lot. If they could rip off a few chunk plays, I kind of like the over. I don't know. Iowa State's a tough team to peg this year. Probably just to stay away. I can't trust West Virginia, though. They might be a quick team. So, any opinion there?
I would stay away from it, man. I don't
Yeah.
West Virginia's been a really odd team all year. That line last week with them and TCU just stunk to high heaven, and I mean, really, they deserved to cover that game. It was 3 points with 25 seconds left, but they didn't. They're just, they're not super consistent. And Donaldson has been the best thing about that entire team. If he's out, I think he was out for that Texas game earlier this year. He went out, I think, in the first quarter or second quarter, and they got absolutely smoked. So I wouldn't touch them until kind of seeing how his injury and absence affects their results.
Yeah, completely agree. Just 2 more here. Austin in the chat asking about the Beavers on Friday night. Assume that's Oregon State. I haven't bet it yet, but I kind of like the over. There's supposed to be some weather in Seattle, rain and everything, but Oregon State is so ground and pound that I don't think it really matters. They're going to run the ball. One of the better running teams in the Pac-12. Washington's defense, I don't rate very highly whatsoever. And for the Washington offense, I know it's throwing, so the rain could throw it off, but I think Penix just has this offense humming. Him and DeBoer are just a match made out of heaven. It's at 57 now. It got steamed down. I kind of like the over. No real opinion on the side. I guess there's no rush to bet the total considering it's getting smashed, but anything there, Graham?
What is the number at on this game now? Is it still 5? I want to say it's
4.5 in that range, above a field goal, less than 6.
Yeah, I kind of like Oregon State. They're coming off a bye week. they were a little beat up and they pulled off that miracle win at Stanford and then hit the bye. I mean, this is a 6-2 football team, right? And very quietly, and they've done that with some injuries at quarterback. Like, I think they're better than a lot of people realize. And I think the offense getting back healthy against a Washington defense, like, I think this is a game they can score into the mid to high 30s or the low 40s. Washington's offense has kind of come back to earth a little bit. That Cal game they played, 7-point game, they struggled a lot. I kind of rate Oregon State's offense more in that, or I'm sorry, Oregon State's defense more in that Cal category, where I think they are a good defense, and I think they get stops in the red zone. So I would lean Oregon State here, especially at 4.5. Like, this is one that I would kind of put more around a touchdown.
Yeah. I think over Oregon State, probably the two looks. Oregon State being able to run the ball is really kind of the great equalizer in this game for me. So I think Oregon State will be able to score. So I think over and Oregon State somewhat correlated because Oregon State will be able to hold up their end of the bargain. On our last one, another Pac-12 game. Do we like a DTR bounce back onto the lights this week against ASU? Yeah, I like the over in this game. Took money. I like the over in the UCLA game last week, but Stanford just couldn't really get anything going. Arizona State made a change at quarterback last week. And I know it was Colorado, but still on the road. They hung, I want to say it was 40 plus. 40 plus. Again, I know it's Colorado, but UCLA's defense really isn't anything to call home about. And then, of course, DTR on the other side with Charbonnet and Bobo. I think that this game, you could see each team get into the 30s with ease here. I think Arizona State, catching 10.5. I don't know. I don't know if I trust UCLA's defense to travel whatsoever. So I like the over. Yeah, it's up over 66.5 now. So maybe like it a little less. I didn't give it out as official play, but I bet the over early in the week. I think that this is shaping up for, a late night shootout.
I'm with you on the points. I really like what UCLA has done this year, but Arizona State is kind of quietly not won a lot of games, but like stayed in a lot of games and scored a lot of points. So I agree with you on that total play, but if I was playing the spread, I would probably play. It's up to 10.5 now. I would play Arizona at that 10.5.
I agree. I think that they're not the corpse they were with Herm Edwards there. They've kind of washed that out, and it's time to start treating them a little bit differently. But yeah, thank you for everyone in the comments. Let's pull up that final recap graphic, and we'll get everyone out of here. So just to recap, Graham took Georgia minus 8.5 against Tennessee, Florida +4 against Texas A&M, Buffalo -3 against Ohio, but he really took +1. So we'll give him a little bit there, but we'll see what happens there. And then Auburn +12 against Mississippi State. I took Georgia minus 8.5 against Tennessee as well. The Missouri, Kentucky under 42. I took Ohio +3 against Buffalo and Kansas State +2.5 against Texas. And there was like 7 other bets we threw in best of the rest. So make sure, if you missed that, rewind, check that out for some more bets. But big shout out to Graham. Thank you again for coming on. Make sure you check out his work. You can follow him on Twitter at DogOutWest. You can follow me on Twitter at Reed Wallach. Bet stamp for all my plays at RW33. And a big shout out to Joanne Woodcock behind the scenes pulling all the strings. She's the best in the business. Until then, happy week 10 and enjoy getting angry about your college football playoff rankings. We'll see you all next week.